Welcome back to the lab. For the past few months, I've been working on a large wireframe sculpture that will eventually be used as part of a commercial Christmas show. The theme of the sculpture is the wind. But what does the wind look like? I imagine the wind looking like the late great Johnny Saws. John was a friend, a former coworker, a talented drummer. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. But if you knew Johnny, you'd know he was the kind of person that would be both honored and amused to have his face immortalized as a giant Christmas light. I started sketching, and this is the final design that I came up with. This is an original creation, so I do control both the copyright and the IP, which is great because, as I mentioned, this will eventually be used as part of a commercial show. This is the part where everyone else drops their design into Fusion 360 and then projects it using a digital projector onto a wall and traces that image onto a large piece of paper. But all of my projectors are analog. And since printing to 35mm slides hasn't been a thing since the 1990s, I decided to freehand it. The sculpture was too large to be self-supporting, so I had to make an exoskeleton for it. For that, I'm using 1-inch square, 11 gauge mild steel tubing. But of course, I didn't have enough of it, and not in the right lengths. But the great thing about steel is that you can unshorten it. I also used 3/4 inch EMT in the areas that were non-critical because I have a lot of it. And before you freak out, yes, I did etch and sand all of the zinc off of it before I welded it. I made each of the sections 4 feet square. That makes them easier to handle, and it also means that I can palletize them for easier storage and for shipping if that ever becomes necessary in the future. Then I drilled holes and bolted all of the sections together into an 8 foot by 8 foot square. For the sculpture itself, I found it was easiest to work in two halves. This is the lower half. And the material I'm using for the actual sculpture is 1/4 inch round bar. This is 1018 mild steel cold rolled. The tick marks that I'm making help me judge where the steel needs to be bent. The closer they are together, the more shaping that piece needs. And then it was back and forth between the template and the bender till I got the shape just right. This took several days. Some of the elements were easier to make than others. And here's what the top of him looks like when all of the bending was finished. And then it was back to welding. Lots and lots of welding. Now, I'll be the first person to point out that I am not a professional welder. By trade, I am a senior data analyst. Having said that, I'm willing to bet that the TIG welds I make are at least as good as any SQL query written by a code welder. And in my race for fame and glory, I forgot one small detail.
Forgot to hook up the doll.
I forgot to hook up the doll.
Ah, son of a bitch.
If you're a fan of a certain band who recorded a certain song in the 90s about a certain spiral, I want you to open another tab in YouTube and pull up that song. And I want you to start playing that song in 3, 2, 1, now. Then it was time to wire up the lights. But since I don't know what the best wire routing is going to be, and I don't know exactly how many lights each section is going to need, I'm just going to use a cheap set of Walmart lights this year and figure out exactly what I need at a later date. My supplier offers commercial lights in increments of 5 lights per string, so when I know exactly what I need, I'll order the correct lengths. For the final installation, I'll hide the lights that I don't want to see by encasing them in heat shrink tubing. But for now, I'm just going to wrap them in electrical tape. I know that made no sense to most of you, but don't overthink it. Don't overanalyze it. Don't let it separate the body from the mind. You'll see where we're going with this in a few minutes. And that's how I made the spirals. But at this point, it was already December the 2nd, and I was out of time for filming. Cue the get her done music, please. It ain't pretty, but it'll work. And I'll build a proper steel base for it later on in the spring. And here he is, the wind, a tribute to the late Johnny Saws. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, and a joyous Festivus. Thanks for watching.